make any parking?
Well, really only if you think they're necessary, we can sort of study it. So right now, what happens is there's only one lane for 17th Street, just like a typical crosstown street here. Then it goes out to 2 on the block, the Union Square block, and then they merge, they sort of squish together going through this awkward intersection. And then it's just, again, a regular crosstown street with parking on either side. We don't really foresee a need. There's really not much going to change. The only thing that's going to change is that we get to go to that 2-phase signal that we were talking about, which will allow us to basically move the same amount of traffic with just one lane and without the awkward driving together in the middle of the intersection.
Okay, so you don't foresee a need to make any changes?
No, unless there's an existing issue that.
No, I just feel like it looks congested on the weekends. Mm-hmm. I live nearby.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? I'd now like to open this up to the public. These will be just questions for the DOT. I'd like to just ask you to stand and introduce yourself when you're called upon. Please, go ahead.
Harold Bride, sir. I appreciate the fact that you're going to make it safer for pedestrians, but I want to point out that one of the reasons you're able to do this is that the MTA has previously discontinued local bus service that used to go down Broadway. So those of us who live in the area don't have that bus service. We're going to get more bicycles, and there is no enforcement of the rules against bicycles violating traffic rules. The point that I want to make, though, is that on 5th Avenue, you're going to be encouraging downtown traffic, not downtown traffic to use 5th Avenue. South, there isn't much that they can do down 5th Avenue because 5th Avenue ends close to Washington Square. So they will be having to make their left-hand turns through the residential neighborhood, which is already very, very heavily congested. 12th Street, 10th Street, and 8th Street have very heavy traffic use, and that's going to just exacerbate the problem.
Sorry, do you have a question?
Well, the question is, have you considered that, and are you discussing that with the community board in that area?
Sure. One of the things that the changes made to Broadway last year did was basically encourage 7th Avenue to be the main through downtown route. So you can thank your friends in Board 7th Avenue for carrying the southbound traffic that Broadway came. So if you were in Midtown and you were going to Lower Manhattan, the emphasis of 7th Avenue at Times Square rather than Broadway, 7th Avenue to come onto Broadway, has really made that the through downtown route. So Broadway is essentially more a local access. Now there will be some traffic in the area on 5th Avenue, as there is today, that currently we signed the last route is 10th Street over, and some traffic is doing that. Because of the grid, the dispersal pattern will be, in a sense, where the increase on all those sort of dispersal routes should be negligible and really not noticeable.
No, but there's a huge amount of traffic coming down Broadway now.
We'll have a comment period. This is just for questions. I'm sorry.
Oh, this was a follow-up comment.
Questions, sir? Please stand and.
Hi, my name is Tony Chisholm, and I'm also a local resident. My question to you is, the idea of concessions was brought up. It's my understanding that Union Square, the park itself, goes from building edge to building edge, north, south, east, and west, not from street sidewalk to street sidewalk. So wouldn't concessions within that 17th Street and Union Square West area go into alienation of park property rules?
Well, it's an interesting question. We've been working closely with the Parks Department on this project, and if and when there would ever be a concession, we would work with them to determine legally which entity handles that and how that's handled.
Well, wouldn't that be the Assembly in Albany?
It wouldn't be alienation. It's mapped to public space. It's not mapped to park land.
It's actually part of the park itself. So therefore, it is under the guidelines of a park.
But your question pertains most
To
specifically
alienation
the-
of that space.
But to the concession issue, is that
Correct.
right? And at this time, we're not planning on concessions.
The other question I have is we're talking about, particularly on that stretch between 18th Street and 17th Street on Broadway. This is a historic district. The concern is regarding what type of furnishings will be placed. Will consideration be to maintain the historic value, the appearance, or are we going to have something that looks like the renderings that you've shown, which look more like Times Square?
Well, one of the things we need to note is that we're piloting the new traffic configurations, right? We want to make sure it works. So what we need to do is not spend the millions of dollars on capital work that would make this permanent. So what we use are inexpensive materials, in which a lot of folks have gotten confused because they are high quality inexpensive materials, but they're inexpensive materials nonetheless. And that allows us to implement the project with essentially little to no construction disruption. Now, you've all gone through the reconstruction of Union Square recently and other reconstruction projects. They're multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects. So we're able to do this with no construction impacts by using this palette of materials. The palette is limited, but it's not the final version. There would be capital amenities that replace what goes in initially.
So what you're saying is we're going to have this look like Times Square for some period of time.
Well, we're working on the final selection, you know, we would work on the final selection of items in consultation with the partnership. It could be similar looking materials.
Would the community be consulted instead
Yes.
of just the partnership?
Sure, we can bring the dialogue right here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jack, did you have a question?
I have several.
Okay.
I'm Jack Taylor. I too live in the neighborhood and have for 52 years. I'm concerned about the left-bound traffic going down Broadway into 17th Street. I have that right? 17th would be one way only, eastbound. Westbound, okay. In that case, how would traffic from going north along Park Avenue South make the turn into 17th Street going west?
Same as it does now. There's a phase for northbound traffic with a green arrow to turn left.
Right.
So that there would be no change. We would redistribute the signal time for the different movements to adjust for the new pattern, but it's westbound, so there'd be no change. You'd still be able to make that northbound left onto 17th.
Which is a very awkward turn. Very awkward and dangerous, I think. Part of the problem was discussed several years ago when it was suggested that a mid-block stop signal be introduced, more or less in front of Barnes and Noble, so that pedestrians could cross the vehicular lane in safety.
Right.
My recollection is that that was against federal rules or something like that, which allowed for 400 feet, is it,